Bob Knight. If you're even somewhat involved in basketball, you're sure to have heard of him, either through one of his scandals or through his passion and devotion to his sport, which has gotten him awards and recognition beyond any other coach in basketball.
Bob Knight is making headlines by blasting IU.
A negative piece of
Grabbing a player by the throat.
Knight was born in 1940 in Massillon, Ohio, and grew up in Orville, Ohio. He began playing organized basketball at Orville High School. Knight continued at Ohio State in 1958 when he played for Basketball Hall of Fame coach Fred Taylor. Despite being a star player in high school, he played a reserve role as a forward on the 1960 Ohio State Buckeyes team that won the NCAA championship and featured future Hall of Fame players John Havlicek and Jerry Lucas. The Buckeyes lost to the Cincinnati Bearcats in each of the next two NCAA championship games, of which Knight was also a part.
I was the last person to go in the locker room. I don't remember just going in and really raising hell with them. I think I did it very quietly.
However, after a playing career of only 22 years, Knight coached junior varsity basketball at Cuyahoga Falls High School in Ohio for 1 year. Knight then enlisted in the United States Army and accepted an assistant coaching position with the Army Black Knights. This was in 1963. There, 2 years later, he was named the head coach at the relatively young age of 24. In 6 seasons at West Point, Knight won 102 games, with his first as a head coach coming against Worcester Polytechnic Institute. One of his players was Mike Krzyzewski, who later served as his assistant before becoming a Hall of Fame head coach at Duke.
Anybody do that? I mean, tell them what the hell is, you're going to ask me questions. What's an unnamed source?
The most comfortable red sweater I've had on in 6 years, I can't tell you.
Mike Silliman was another of Knight's players at Army, and Knight was quoted as saying, "Mike Silliman is the best player I have ever coached." During his tenure at Army, however, Knight gained a reputation for his explosive temper.
Technical against the bench and against Bob Knight. Have the honors shooting the technicals. Looky here. Bobby Knight just threw his chair.
For example, at Army's 66-60 loss to BUY, and Hall of Fame coach Stan Watts in the semifinals of the 1966 NIT, Knight completely lost control, kicking lockers and verbally blasting the officials. Embarrassed, he later went to Watts' hotel room and apologized. Watts forgave him and is quoted as saying, "I want you to know that you're going to be one of the bright young coaches in the country, and it's just a matter of time before you win a national championship."
This is an opportunity to talk about that.
Well, I'm not going to talk about it because I'm sure that one time or another I grabbed a lot of kids.
It amazes you then you don't know anything about basketball. You're illuminating your relative lack of knowledge of the game with a statement like that.
In 1971, Knight got hired as the head coach at Indiana University. During his 29-year career as coach of the Hoosiers, they won 662 games. However, the day March 14, 2000 would turn out to be a fatal day for Knight's coaching career at Indiana. That day, CNN ran a piece on Knight that featured claims by former player Neil Reed. He claimed that Knight had choked him during a practice in 1997. Considering Knight's temper and previous outlashes, this wasn't hard to believe. The claims were proven, and this resulted in a zero-tolerance policy for Knight, which, unfortunately, but unsurprisingly, he broke. Knight retired in 2008.
in fact, he wants to do, instead of going through a lot of bullshit, that most of which has not happened in press conferences.
In 2008, ESPN hired Knight as a studio analyst and occasional color commentator. In November 2012, he called an Indiana men's basketball game for the first time, something he had previously refused to do. Former Indiana men's basketball coach Tom Crean reached out to Knight in an attempt to get him to visit the school again. Knight returned to an Indiana basketball game in Assembly Hall for the first time in 20 years on February 8, 2020. On April 2, 2015, ESPN announced that it would not renew its contract with Knight.
No motivational device I've ever come across is as good as this.
Your players were asked this too. Do they fear you at times on the floor?
Like that, and I don't know how Steve feels about it, but it just and you don't have to bleep one single word of this.
When it comes to the NBA overall, Bobby Knight has become very influential. So much so that not listening to his predictions and recommendations is controversial. This makes sense though, since he tried to convince the Blazers to draft Michael Jordan, which they didn't, and that turned out to be a huge mistake. After the Rockets picked up Olajuwon with the #1 pick in the 1984 draft, the Blazers were choosing between Sam Bowie and Michael Jordan. The Blazers went for Bowie, since they saw him as a better match for the team. This, however, raised the question: should you rather draft the best player or the best match for your team? The approach of drafting the best match for your team would have made sense, since Portland was confident that they had their guy in Clyde Drexler. They weren't looking for another top player, they were looking for someone to support Drexler's team. This choice, however, is questionable when there is someone like Michael Jordan available, and Knight made his own statement on this.
The kid is just an absolutely great kid. If I were going to pick the 3 or 4 best athletes I've ever seen play basketball, he'd be one of them. I think he's the best athlete I've ever seen play basketball, bar none. If I were going to pick people with the best ability I'd ever seen play the game, he'd be one of them. If I were going to pick the best competitors that I'd ever seen play, he'd be one of them. So in the categories of competitiveness, ability, skill, and then athletic ability, he's the best athlete, he's one of the best competitors, he's one of the most skilled players. And that, to me, makes him the best basketball player that I've ever seen play.
When Bobby Knight says something like this, you draft that player. The Blazers, however, weren't convinced. They needed a center, and MG wasn't. Knight, however, told them that if they needed a center, MG would be the best goddamn center they'd ever had. Well, the Blazers didn't draft him, and the rest is history. Thank you for watching another NBA video, and if you have any suggestions for future videos, corrections, or anything you want to add, feel free to comment down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, a like and subscribe could really support this channel. So, see you in the next one.